Welcome, welcome. I had a little technical problem, but I think I'm now on. So I'm glad you joined us for our Facebook Live on, okay, I survived separation, divorce, but what do I do with my anger? How do I handle that? So I'll quick introduce myself. My name's Georgia Shaffer. I live in South Central Pennsylvania. So let me know in the chat where you're from. And I'm a professional Christian coach with the International Coach Federation, as well as a licensed psychologist in Pennsylvania. So again, I'm glad to have you here. And we're going to talk about how do we handle this anger in an effective way. Because the issue is when you're separated, when you're divorced, you don't have a whole lot of resources. There's so much in your life that's out of your control. You're trying to take one step at a time. And so your emotions are real, they're raw. And when it comes to anger, it can be pretty intense. So given we don't want to hurt the people around us, and we don't want our anger to sort of eke out in our comments, in our relationships, just knowing if you're like other divorce separated women, here's some comments I often get. One woman said, I am really struggling with anger. She said, I can't wait till this is all behind me because then I'm going to burn my red rage journal. I love that. A red rage journal. Now, I had a journal and I dumped a lot of junk as far as anger and toxic thoughts in it, but it wasn't red. Another woman dealing with separation said, I'm slowly working through all the unkind thoughts I have about my soon-to-be ex. She said, as I work towards forgiveness, I find I'm less likely to wish that bad things would happen to him. Now, we don't always want to confess that out loud, but the truth is, sometimes we do have those unkind feelings going through our minds. Another woman who's divorced said, is the anger always going to be so intense? She said, I am just furious how the divorce has negatively impacted my children. She said they didn't choose this. And you know, at this time of year, with the holidays coming up in another month or so, that anger can be especially prevalent when we think of the special times we may have had in the past as a family, which is now broken up. So let's get down to some practical suggestions. How knowing this anger is really intense, how knowing it can cripple you, paralyze you, how can you deal with it effectively so that you can manage it rather than it controlling you? Well, the first tip I'm going to suggest is take time to reflect, consider, identify are all the thoughts that you have around this issue of anger. I can tell you as a child, I grew up in a very abusive home. My father was a rageaholic. And so I grew up thinking all anger was wrong because it was very scary. It was very frightening. It was wrong to be mad. And I felt anger is something to be avoided at all costs. The idea of embracing it, handling it, and expressing it in healthy ways, well, that wasn't even on my radar as a child. How did your parents approach anger? Did they allow you to express your frustration or when you got mad? Or did you learn quickly, like me, in order to protect yourself, either growing up or maybe in your marriage? Anger needed to be avoided to survive. for your own self-protection. The problem is if we don't learn how to handle it, if we don't learn the skills, we quickly learn as adults, holding it in doesn't work, pretending it doesn't exist. That's not helpful. And so what happens is these angry feelings just pile up, build up to the point where we say or do something we later regret. And so it doesn't work to hold it in. So getting back to considering how are you looking at anger, you might have to reframe your viewpoint on it. Well, what does the Bible say about anger? The Apostle Paul says, be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. So first of all, he's giving us permission. He's saying, Scripture says, be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. So the idea being, be angry, but then you need to handle it in a proper and timely manner. You're not stewing on it. You're not letting it pile up for weeks and months and growing into bitterness and resentment. So the issue isn't that it's wrong to be angry. The issue is, what are you doing or not doing with it? I like what the Message version of Ecclesiastes 7:9 says. Don't be quick to fly off the handle. So there again, don't be sinning, control your anger, because anger boomerangs. You can spot a fool by the lumps on his head. So again, don't let it, don't fly off the handle. We're going to control it. So let's first recognize what are the ways we don't want to express our anger. And here I'm talking about destructive faces of anger. Now, as a child, the only face of anger I knew was physical and verbal aggression. And I find a lot of people, when they think of anger, that's the face of anger they think of. But there's other faces. There's other ways we express and can handle our anger in ways that are not life-giving for others in our life. One example of a destructive way is making a sarcastic comment. And as someone's pulling out the knife to the zinger that you delivered, you then say, hey, I was only kidding. But they're hurt. They're pulling that knife out. So sarcasm is just a way that anger ekes out, not healthy. Another way is critical words when we say something like, well, I was only telling you this for your own good. And so again, it's sort of that subtle stabbing somebody. Or vengeful behavior, where you are plotting and planning, and how are you going to get back at that person who hurt you? Well, you got to remember, vengeance is mine, says God. Vengeance, again, not a healthy way of expressing your anger. Or I had one lady, I was speaking on unhealthy ways of handling our anger, and afterwards, a woman came up to me and she said, I never thought of myself as getting angry, but when you talked about giving people the silent treatment, she said, that's exactly what I do. When I'm angry at my son, I just don't talk to him for a while. So the silent treatment is another way of expressing our anger in not a life-giving way. And then the final way that I'm going to talk about is when we withhold something that we know as someone wants, our time, our attention, our affection. We just hold it back. And then if somebody asks, well, what's wrong? Did I say or do something? And we say, no, nothing's wrong. When in fact, it is. So what we want to do, and this is the next point, is you want to take that anger and you want to transform it into a positive force for good. Or in trash terms, you want to recycle it, because anger is a force. It doesn't disappear. So you need to figure out how are you going to channel it in the right way. When I was writing the book, Taking Out Your Emotional Trash, a friend of mine suggested I visit a landfill and a recycle center. Now, at the time I said, but I'm talking about dealing with our emotional trash, so to speak. And so she kept asking me. So finally I went, but I'm glad I did, because here's the example I want to give you in transforming, recycling your anger. When I went to the recycling center, what they do, let's take a plastic jug, a plastic gallon of what was milk. They take all those plastic containers, they compress them. Well, they first clean them, compress them, and then they tie them into bales. At which point, and maybe things changed since I wrote my book, but this was what was being done at the recycling center I visited. So then what happens, those bales of plastic containers that were compressed, they are taken to another location where they are melted down into little tiny, well, I shouldn't say tiny, like peanut-shaped nuggets. So you still have that plastic material, but it's now transformed into these little plastic nuggets, at which point it's sent to different manufacturers who then make the choice, what are they going to use those plastic nuggets for? Maybe they'll make a Polartec fleece, or maybe they'll be made into plastic soda bottles. But the point I want you to hear is the plastic that started in the recycle container is still the same raw material when it gets turned into something good, or new, I should say, something new and different. So the question is, what is the way you're going to transform your energy into something new and positive? So let me give you some examples of how we can take that real energy, that intense energy, that anger. What are we going to do with it? Well, sometimes if we do something physical, like go for a bike ride, or a long walk, or a brisk walk, or cleaning the house, or gardening. That's what I would do, pull out the weeds. Or one lady was at an area where there was nobody around, and she threw rocks into the lake. Another divorced woman said she likes to get Play-Doh when she gets really angry and sort of work her anger out with that Play-Doh and squish it and make different shapes with it. As we talked about at the very beginning, the woman who can't wait to burn her red rage journal. That's one of the things I did. I just dumped a lot of my anger, my frustrations, things that made me mad on the pages of my journal. Got it out. Maybe you want to talk to a friend or a counselor and process those into something new and different. Sometimes the issue is we're just run down, we're worn thin, and we just need to get some rest, eat well, take some care of, and be compassionate to ourselves. So there's different ways, and the issue is, what are you going to choose to do with your anger? How are you going to recycle it in a positive way? And then the next point I want to make when we're talking about our anger is accept the fact that when you're working to control your anger, to recycle it, transform that energy into something positive, there'll be still times where you probably do or say things you regret. And so what you want to do in those kind moments is be kind to yourself. We all make mistakes. We're human. Only God is perfect. The rest of us, we fall short of the glory of God. So there are going to be times, especially when you're going through separation and divorce, you're not always thinking clearly. You're not always sleeping well. And so all these things will negatively impact your ability to handle your emotions in a positive way. So instead of beating yourself up endlessly, which will not hurt and steal valuable energy that you need, you want to go boldly to the throne of God's grace. Ask for forgiveness. Ask yourself, next time, what do I want to do differently? Next time, how do I want to handle it? Maybe there's some people in your life you got to go back and make things right with. But it's okay to be angry, and it's also okay to be angry in front of God. He already knows how you feel. So the last point I want to give you, when you feel that tension in your neck, or your hands are starting to form a fist, or you're sweating and you're about to lose it, what you want to do is hit pause. Take a couple deep breaths, count to 10. Now, I'm sure you've heard that advice before. And the reason that is such great advice is this. In those 10 seconds, in that time you're taking a deep breath, first of all, you can pray to God and ask him, how do you want to handle this? But what you have to understand within our brains, the oldest part of our brain tends to overreact. It wants to protect us. But at times, as I was giving you the message version earlier, sometimes it flies off the handle. And that's when we say or do things we later regret. So when we first have that overreaction, the blood is taken to the oldest part of our brain and it's taken away from the rational part of our brain, where we can think things through, the frontal cortex. But within those 10 seconds, the blood flows back to the rational part of the brain when you can start to think more clearly. So when you feel you're about to lose it, hit pause. And remember some of these scriptures. James 1:19. We are told to be slow to be angry. So don't say anything. Be slow to speak and slow to become angry. Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty. So we want to be wise in the way we handle our anger. And the other thing about hitting pause is it gives us time to ask questions like, well, is what I'm about to do the best for me and the best for the people around me? If I'm about to handle this in a way that maybe only make the situation worse than it already is. So again, that time to slow down and think is far better than to say or do something in the heat of the moment. Here are some things that I have heard young mothers do dealing with children, because I know my son's now older, but I know as a young mom, I could lose it pretty quickly. One young mother said, I give my children timeouts, and she says, sometimes I tell them mom needs a timeout, that I need time to pray. I need time to think things through. Another mother said, I need timeouts so there's no blackouts. Again, that idea of slowing down, retreating, so to speak. Sometimes we just have to create a little distance from those around us. One person said, I don't want to destroy my family or my children with a Mack truck of my emotional fury. And I think that's what all of us want to do. We don't want to destroy others with our emotional fury. So I just want to, in summary, say, here are the tips. Reflect, consider, how do you view anger? Understand what the Bible says about anger. Be angry. Just handle it in a proper and timely manner. Recognize if you're expressing it in an unhealthy way, like giving someone the silent treatment or sarcasm. All those are not healthy ways. But then take that energy, because it exists, and transform it into something positive. And then finally, realize there are going to be times when you say or do things you regret. So how do you want to handle it next time? Give yourself some grace. And then remember, hit pause. Give yourself those 10 seconds. One of the members, one of the things I want to share before I get off this Facebook Live is tomorrow's the last day to sign up for Rebuild After Divorce. This is an online Christian community for women who are rebuilding again after separation or divorce. They want to move forward. They're growth-minded. And it's a Christian community of women who, first of all, get what your life's like, but they're also encouraging, supportive. And we meet 3 times a month on Tuesday nights from 7 to 8:15 Eastern Time. And one Tuesday, I do a teaching session on some aspect of rebuilding. For example, I might do a night on anger, but go into a lot more detail of practical things you can do. Then we have one Tuesday a month, we do implementation. Whatever I taught on, I have a co-leader, and she helps you tailor it to your life. Then the third Tuesday in the month, we have a guest. Bring in experts, so to speak, on all different facets of beginning anew, starting over. So if this is something you would be interested, again, tomorrow's the last day. So go into georgiashaffer.com/rebuild membership. And if you have any questions, I wanted to mention that earlier, but I totally forgot. Feel free to post them in the chat. And if I don't answer them right now, I will go back in and answer them later. So do we have any questions? But again, tomorrow is the last day. And I definitely hope you consider, if you know somebody who's separated or divorced, who's struggling, who wishes they had others in their lives to explain. So thank you for joining us, and handle that anger in a healthy way. Remember the constructive ways of expressing your anger. Take care.